Hi everyone. Thanks for joining me. I have seen lately a fun tag, something that's different than the other Booktube tags, and it's just different enough and quirky enough and not me enough that I wanted to try it. And this is a tag that's got a bunch of prompts that are very quick, and I haven't spent a lot of time looking at them. I haven't looked at the whole list because I didn't want to, because the fun of the tag is to just answer as quickly as you can with a whole lot of, with not a lot of thought. This is the Booktube A to Z hot or not tag, which is so not me, hot or not, but I like to watch. I really like to watch a couple people that I know do this tag. Sorry. All right. So I have the list here on my iPad that I'll start with. So the idea is that you go through each category from A to Z, which is why it needs to be kind of quick. And for you in your reading life, is this thing hot or not? The subject, the thing, whatever it is. Okay. A, audiobooks. Hot-ish, warm for me. I am not a big audiobook listener, but the audiobooks that I have listened to are some of my absolute favorite ones. And I have kept them, and because I've got them on Audible years ago, and I keep listening to different snippets of them. I go back to them because they're my favorites. I think I just mentioned this in the last video, which is the Joan Didion memoirs and the Magic Mountain version that I have, that I just bought earlier in 2023 because I had a credit to use before I canceled Audible. Again, is just the best version for me that I could have ever purchased. So yeah, I used to be a prolific audiobook listener, but I'm not anymore. B, Bildungsroman, dealing with a person's formative years or spiritual education. I love Bildungsroman. I don't go looking for them, but when I stumble on them, I'm always delighted. I think I would be put off if I was actually looking for them, but I have enjoyed when I've started reading a story and realized it was a Bildungsroman. The one that comes to mind right away is The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. You could say that her other book, A Little Friend, is that what it's called? Could be that too, but truly The Goldfinch is. And recent ones of that I've read, Demon Copperhead. I really enjoyed that when I read it. It feels like a distant memory now, but when I was in it, I was in it. What else? I mean, I don't think you could call A Secret History a Bildungsroman. Jane Eyre, to me, was that type of book that I really enjoyed. I'll see if my mind can come up with some others. C, children's books. Oh, I'm supposed to be answering hot or not. I loved the children's books that I grew up with, but they're not hot for me anymore. I don't read children's books. I think if I had children, young children or grandchildren, I'm looking for a reason to be going to the library and just stacking up the children's books and bringing them home like I used to. Or picking them up at the store, our grocery store, back way back 25 years ago or whatever, had paperback versions of some famous books, and I would pick them up every once in a while when we were grocery shopping, and that was a lot of fun. Digital. No, not a digital reader. I've said before that, strangely, I have Kindle books on my Kindle app on my phone. I cannot read books on my iPad whatsoever. I don't have any desire to have a Kindle white paperback, whatever they're called. But I do have a couple books on my phone that I do reach for on a plane if I'm getting a little nervous because of the turbulence, and they just work. And that is a couple of the Rachel Cusk books. E, experimental. Usually not. Usually not. I'm thinking of, like, I read Clara and the Sun by Kaza Ishiguro. I'm forgetting the author's name. And it was all right. I went along with it. It mixed like realism with futurism, and that was all right. I guess that's not really experimental. I have to say, I really liked Yanagihara's To Paradise. I don't know, is that experimental? I mean, she created 3 worlds that don't exist. So maybe experimental is something like Orlando or To the Lighthouse or something. I loved Melissa Broder's Death Valley that I just read. I don't know if that's truly experimental, but I don't go seeking for it. I have to move along faster because I'm only on E now. Fantasy, sadly, no. I say sadly because it's a whole world, so that I just can't get myself to venture into. I don't have any desire, and we really have to be driven to at least try something in order to enjoy the reading experience. If I tried a fantasy book now, I would just feel like I was trying it, and I don't really have the desire yet. Graphic novel. I actually have a graphic novel on hold. It's one that's popular right now. The name is Monica, and I don't know the author, but if I remember, I'll list it below. It's been on hold for a long time. I don't think my library has it yet, but it's just published this year, I think, and I'm interested in that. I'm interested in like adult graphic novels, I think. I haven't read one yet. So that's something that I'm willing to try. Horror, hard no, not a hard not. I did read a lot of Stephen King's when I was young, when I was a teenager, and that phase is over. Inspirational. It used to be hot, really hot for me, inspirational. I really enjoyed reading nonfiction inspirational books. I talked about the Richard Carlson, I think that's his name. I read many books in that genre when I was young, and that was really informative to me. Recently, in recent years, I'd say within the last 5 years, I was led to a couple inspirational books by reading the book by Jerry Colonna. I'm forgetting the name of the book. But he went through a crisis. It was like an identity crisis. He was a very successful person, but he came from an extremely poor background. And so he had this imposter syndrome and lots of things. And it was just the right book at the right time. And that book led me to other books. I've certainly read Pema Chodron's books. I also listened to them back in the day. Love listening to a Pema Chodron book. She's a Buddhist monk. And Parker Palmer, who is this philosopher writer who's also a Quaker, but that's not what he's always been all his life. And his books are about his journey and his life lessons. And I have one from about 5 years ago called Let Your Life Speak. Fantastic. Journalism, yes, very hot. I love journalistic nonfiction. I talked about a book that I read a couple years ago that's now won the Pulitzer Prize. I don't recall the name of it, but it was the life story of a girl named Dasani, I think. And it was a reporter spending 10 years following Dasani's life from Brooklyn to going to a boarding school essentially in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and so on and so on. So I'll make sure that I list that book. But I do like that kind of book. I haven't read very many since then. Kitsch has a popular or sentimental appeal. I think the only thing that comes close to kitsch for me, I don't go searching for it, But I've read a couple Myra Kalman books, which are illustrated because she's an illustrator, a wonderful illustrator, a wonderful humorist. She's in the New Yorker magazine a lot. And so I consider what she does kitsch. Library. I mean, do I even need to talk about my love, my adoration for libraries? It all started when I was young. I can remember the very first library we went to when we lived in Ohio. And then when we moved to a little town outside of Pittsburgh, we went to that darling library, and which I've gone to now that I live in Pittsburgh again. I've gone back to that library, and I walk in and everything feels like I'm a giant in a little library, because the last time I was there, I was a child. But when I lived in Pittsburgh as an adult, I fell in love with the branch in the city that I live near. When I moved to Colorado, I fell in love with the branch that I went to there. I mean, it just goes on and on. I just wouldn't know. There's something magical that happens to me when I walk into a library. Mystery, not hot anymore. It used to be hot for me. I started my reading with, when I was a certain age, Encyclopedia Brown. And then I went straight to Agatha Christie and spent my early teenage years reading my way through Agatha Christie, mostly, in the end, mostly Hercule Poirot. I read all of the Hercule Poirot mysteries until I read the final one, and that was pretty ominous, knowing I was reading the last one. But I am not drawn to mystery at all anymore. My mother is a mystery reader, but I'm not. Nonfiction, again, I'd say sadly it's warm for me. I love it. It's just that I have to randomly come across something in the library. I don't crave it, but when I see something in the library and it really hits, then it feels like it sparks something and I pick it up. Omnibus. I'm not a big omnibus reader, I have to say. I find that if I have a big collection of short stories or something, that I don't end up picking it up. The book is too big. I have some of Hemingway's stories. I feel like when I do read Farewell to Arms, I have to take that big collection of stories off of the shelf and hold that large book in my hand. So that's a little off-putting. The only time that does not bother me at all is when it's a collection of letters and journals. And so one of my favorite collections that I read a couple years ago is the Patricia Highsmith Diaries and Journals. I sat with that thing, like I read mostly at night before I go to bed, and I sat with that thing on my lap in bed reading it for months through the wintertime. And I still think about that reading experience. The other book of letters that I adore is a book between, is it Robert Maxwell and I'm completely forgetting the two people, but one of them was a longtime editor at the New Yorker magazine, and the other was a writer. And one was living in the UK, the other is in New York, and their long time relationship via correspondence lasted forever, for decades. It started right around when World War II started. So we hear about the bombing raids in London. Sylvia Townsend Warner. Maybe it's Robert Maxwell, William Maxwell. I'll make sure that I list the book down below because I adore it. I spent, again, like a winter time, every night I would read a couple letters. I would read their correspondence and how their lives change over the decades, how their relationship changes. The writing of these two people, it's just like the Patricia Highsmith journals and diaries. There's nothing like reading the diaries and letters and journals of a writer. So I highly recommend that. All right, I'm going to keep moving. Poetry. Sadly, I am not a poetry reader. I am not a regular poetry reader, so this is not hot for me. I want to, though, become a more regular reader of poetry. I did get out that poetry book a couple months ago, and I loved looking at it. I do tend to go back to the poets that I know, like Mary Oliver and Rilke, Those are the two that I'm thinking of right now. They're like just, that would never fail me if I'm picking up a book of their poems. I adore the way that they write and they really connect with me. But I do want to explore poetry more. I don't even go over to that part of the library, I have to say. And the library I go to has an extraordinary collection. Quests, when the protagonist goes on a quest, physical or spiritual, this is kind of, to me, similar to a Bildungsroman. It can be. And so I relate it to that. And when I think of the books that I mentioned, especially the Goldfinch, there's a quest. There's a quest in that story. The whole story is a quest, and the main character is growing up as he's on this quest. So I don't mind it. I don't go looking for it, though. When it happens, it happens. I don't think I could look for a book that has a quest theme, but I've enjoyed when I've stumbled on them. So that's warm, I guess, for me. Romance, not at all. Not at all a romance reader. That could change. Science fiction, not at all. And again, I feel like that could be something that I grow into, but I don't read any now. Okay, I had to pause because Suki came in and I had to take her out of the room. T, the next one is T, translation. Oh, since I discovered the Booker, the International Prize, not this past year, but maybe in 2022, but this year especially, that prize, I don't really follow or care too much about who gets on the short list from the long list and whatever, but it gets books on my radar. And more importantly, it gets authors on my radar. That really happened this year. It happened with Eva Baltazar. So I've discovered her and read Permafrost and Boulder. I just love that sparse, poetic writing, in that she's just choosing words ever so carefully and constructing sentences that way. And Vigdis Hjorth. I read the Is Mother Dead, which was on the Booker Prize long list last year, or maybe it was earlier this year, depending on the timing. And then I went on to read Long Live the Post Horn in the summer, and now I'm reading Will and Testament. So these might be the only three of her books that have been translated to English. I love it. I just can't get enough. And I read from the long list. I also discovered The Birthday Party, the author who wrote The Birthday Party, French. I don't recall his name. Translated fiction has changed my reading, and the Booker Prize really is like a catalyst for that. So our library does a really good job of having this huge international fiction section of all the new releases. So you see the new fiction and then you see the new translated fiction. I think they call it world fiction. Übermensch, the Superman or the extraordinary human, characters who can do everything. That's going to be a not for me. I can't even think about an example of that. Victorian literature from 1837 to 1901. Super hot for me, super hot. I wouldn't have said that before last year, before I rekindled my appetite for books that are written in the 1800s, mostly in the mid 1800s. So that's the Tolstoy that I'm reading, and the Trollope, and Charlotte Bronte, and I read George Elliott. I mean, I just feel like you exercise that muscle, and then you'll find authors within that time period that you like their style better than others. And I've just discovered many of them now. My project for 2024, and I'm getting this from the author Brandon Taylor's Instagram feed. He has convinced me, along with Sarah from Hardcover Hearts, they have both convinced me that I must try Emile Zola. So that's going to be something I try in 2024. I don't know where to start. So please recommend where I should start with Emile Zola. But Brandon Taylor has just finished 20 books, and it took him 3 years. He just posted this on Instagram. I have to know what that's all about. Western, W, not hot. I don't mind a book that's set in the West. I love the West, but I don't read Westerns as a genre. X-rated. No, I'm not reading X-rated. I mean, I certainly don't mind a book that has sex in it. I can't say I'm searching for X-rated books. Young adult, no, I am not a young adult reader at all. Not at all. I was when my kids were young, and I would get into reading series with them, and that was fun. Z, zeitgeist, spirit or mood of the times. I like reading nonfiction books about the zeitgeist of certain periods, and mainly like 1920s, the way that artists were living. And it could be other time periods too, in between the wars. So in the 1920s seems to be the time period that I'm drawn to. That's it. That's the Booktube A to Z hot or not tag. Please consider yourself tagged. Don't look very hard at the list, and just go. Just turn the camera on and go, because it's a lot of fun, and we learn a lot more about you when you do a list like this. So please feel free to jump aboard, have fun. Thanks for joining me. I'd love for you to join in the conversation about any of the hots or nots that I've talked about. And I'll see you on the next one.